Hezbollah weapons storage facilities. And the strikes comes a day after Lebanese and Israeli representative held their first direct talks in decades. We'll bring you all the details on that story on the show. Let's begin with the headlines.
After a red carpet reception with a warm hug and a car ride with Prime Minister Modi, Russian President Vladimir Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan today and will also visit Rajghat this morning.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi presents a Russian-language copy of Bhagavad Gita to President Vladimir Putin during his two-day visit to India, describing the scripture as a source of inspiration for millions worldwide.
All eyes will be on the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit, which will focus on defense, energy and trade. Multiple agreements and MOUs are expected to be signed as President Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi hold talks today.
Indigo apologizes for flight disruptions across India over past 2 days, which led to cancellation of over 550 flights due to technical and operational issues, says its teams are working diligently to restore normalcy.
The U.S. military says the strike on an alleged drug trafficking boat in the Eastern Pacific Ocean killed 4 people, with video showing the vessel being hit by a blast. U.S. campaign has so far taken more than 85 lives in the region.
FBI arrests a Virginia man accused of placing 2 pipe bombs outside headquarters of Republican and Democratic national parties in Washington on the eve of the U.S. Capitol attack in January 2021.
I think they've spent a lot of time killing each other, and now they're going to spend a lot of time hugging, holding hands, and taking advantage of the United States of America.
U.S. President Donald Trump and the leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo sign a peace deal, even as fresh violence raises questions about a call to end one of Africa's longest wars.
Donald Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, to meet with Ukrainian negotiators for the 3rd time in 2 weeks to press his plan to end the war, 2 days after the envoys met Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Israeli raids hit southern Lebanon as its military says it is targeting Hezbollah weapon storage facilities, a day after Lebanese and Israeli civilian representatives held their first direct talks in decades.
U.S. Treasury has eased some sanctions on Lukoil, allowing its fuel stations outside Russia to keep operating while still blocking funds from reaching Moscow. The shift partially rolls back Trump's tougher measures as Washington pursues talks on ending the war in Ukraine. And Russian President Vladimir Putin is in India on a two-day state visit, the highly anticipated trip that marks a pivotal chapter in Moscow-New Delhi ties.
Right, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi greeted the Russian President at the Palam Technical Airport, showcasing their strong relationship and admiration for each other. And this with a warm hug and also a car ride together.
Now, Prime Minister Modi gifted a Russian edition of Bhagavad Gita to the Russian president, calling teachings of the Gita an inspiration for millions across the world.
Today, Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan, followed by a visit to Rajghat to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi.
The Russian president will then have bilateral talks with the Prime Minister at Hyderabad House. Discussions are aimed at strengthening economic ties, enhancing trade routes, and advancing cooperation in military technology, logistics, and innovation.
The two leaders are also expected to discuss major projects like the second overhauling of the Sukhoi 30 fighter jets, equipping Indian fleet with the R-37 air-to-air missiles that can hit targets up to more than 200 kilometers, along with S-400 and 500 long-range and Verba very short-range air defense systems.
And the two sides are also likely to discuss developing the lighter variants of the missiles, like the BrahMos NG, which can be fitted on all types of fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Now, these missiles will have a capability to hit targets at over 400 kilometers, while longer-range versions of the missiles will engage targets at more than 3 times of the present capability.
Post-lunch, Putin will address the India-Russia Business Forum. Both India and Russia are hoping to energize private sector partnerships and also attract new investments.
Now, in the evening, Indian President Draupadi Murmu will be hosting a state banquet in Russian president's honor. In view of the high-profile visit, traffic restrictions and diversions have been announced in New Delhi.
Well, since 2000, Putin has visited India multiple times, his last being in 2021 before the start of the Ukraine war. Vladimir Putin is expected to depart New Delhi around 9:30 p.m. local time.
Well, for more on this, we are now being joined by Ajaz Zakim from Washington, D.C. He's a former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We welcome you on the broadcast. Thank you so much for taking out your time. Now, we're, of course, going to be watching these bilateral take place. I would like to know, how is Washington looking at these talks?
Well, of course, you're going to get different impressions from different parts of Washington. I think it's important to recognize that. For example, the Democrats, the Democratic Party, does not like the fact that it perceives, you can debate whether the perception is correct, but it perceives Mr. Modi as very authoritarian. That's an issue for them. For Mr. Trump, the issue is that India continues to acquire Russian oil and has imposed 50% tariffs on anything that India produces that is related to those oil purchases. So those are points of friction. On the other hand, and it's very important to remember this, first of all, India wants to see itself as an independent actor. It's going to maintain relations both with the United States and with Russia. Secondly, in terms of the U.S.-Indian relationship, the military relationship is quite strong and continues, including training exercises, for example. There's technological cooperation. We've just signed a couple of new agreements in August with India regarding technology cooperation. And of course, there's the Indian diaspora in the United States, which is not only very strong, but very highly placed. For example, I'm in California right now. Silicon Valley, high tech, lots and lots of Indian American players. So it's a complex relationship. The reactions to Putin's visit are going to be mixed. But I think if you bear in mind what is going on between the United States and India, that is still pretty strong in spite of everything.
I agree with you, sir. And of course, while India and the US relationship continues to go in the trajectory that it's going, but also with the camaraderie that we are seeing when Prime Minister Modi received Putin, we also see it as rather symbolic of the warmth that was also reminiscent of what we saw during SCO with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Prime Minister Modi. So the camaraderie was definitely on display. So a clear message has been sent that while Washington-India ties are important, so are Russia's ties with India. Now, do you see that given in light of these recent developments, there is a chance of the RIC also reviving?
Well, again, the relationship between India and China is sticky in some respects, obviously. The border has never been settled. And after all said and done, they actually fought against each other, perhaps in a minor way, but they did not all that long ago. To me, it's a reflection of what I read in the foreign minister's book not all that long ago, where he essentially said India wants to have decent relationships, but independent relationships, both with the United States, with China, and with Russia. Look, India is part of the BRICS, but India is also part of the Quad. That should tell you exactly how India has been described by Foreign Minister Jaishankar and how India wants to continue to operate.
Do you, sir, also do you see this development as also a change in the world order towards a more multipolar setting as compared to not per se challenging the Western dominance, but create diversification here? Do you see this particular development as leading towards that?
No, I think it's a reflection of what's been going on for a while, actually. Again, India has had long-term relations with Russia, including purchasing Russian military equipment, and yet look how much American military equipment it's buying. Transport aircraft, all kinds of materials, missiles and so on, and is buying some missiles from Russia. India clearly would like to see a multipolar world, and that's its objective. The United States is not necessarily opposed to Indian capabilities and Indian power, if only because India and China, as I said, have a complex relationship, and to us, that's actually to the good. So, yes, the reality is you've got multiple poles, but again, I think that everyone would recognize that at least at this moment, China and the United States are at one level, and then you have Europe, Russia, India at a somewhat lesser level, but clearly, in the case of India in particular, moving very fast up the chain in terms of its economy, in terms of its defense capabilities, and frankly, in terms of its diplomacy.
And also, if I must add, of course, it does show, as my colleague just said, a shift in the whole dimension, because when we talk about relations between India and US, well, we also, look at the immigration that has been taking place. A lot of issues have been taking place, the tariffs that have taken place. So we do see that, yes, there's probably one way which these relations, this Russia and India relations are showing that, well, not particularly, again, dominating the West domination, but of course showing that, yes, there are different options that people look for. Even during the tariffs, Brazil was also looking for different options, trading with China. How does the U.S. perceive all this?
Well, again, I think the United States, certainly Mr. Trump has made it very, very clear that he does not want to see India or any other country helping to prop up the Russian economy, which simply helps Putin to continue his war against Ukraine. And especially Mr. Trump is trying to bring about an agreement between the two warring parties. Look, he just did something today at the Institute of Peace between two African countries. But obviously, getting some agreement between Russia and Ukraine would be a huge feather in his cap. But to do that, he has to be able to put pressure not just on Ukraine, but on Russia. And if you recall, the original 28-point peace plan was withdrawn very, very quickly because it was perceived to be too favorable to Russia. And the revision is one that the Ukrainians can at least begin to think about living with. So to the extent that countries are supporting Russia, that is not going to enhance their relationship with the United States. But I repeat what I said earlier. The U.S.-Indian relationship, A, is complex, but at B, in many ways, is still quite strong in spite of the limitations on foreign experts coming in on visas and in spite of the tariffs, which are clearly irritants between the two countries.
Well, of course, we'll be looking at it. And when you talk about relations, India and Russia relations do go back historically to since Soviet Russia. But well, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and analyzing all of that. We'll, of course, wait and see how this all plays out.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump envoy are to meet with Ukrainian negotiators for the third time in 2 weeks to press his plan to end the war.
And according to U.S. officials, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be meeting Rustem Umerov in the Miami area for dinner. The gathering, which will be close to the press, comes 2 days after the duo met Russian President Vladimir Putin for 5 hours in Moscow.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, in a late-night address, said that the task in hand is to obtain complete information about what has been said in Russia. In a dig at his Russian counterpart, he said it is yet to be known what are the reasons Putin has found to prolong the war. Zelensky added that Ukraine is prepared for any possible developments.
When questioned by reporters on whether Witkoff and Kushner could get a sense of what Putin genuinely wants, Trump said he wants to end the war. But Putin showed no public signs of budging as Russia made slow but steady progress seizing land in eastern Ukraine. Putin previously warned Ukrainian troops must withdraw from Donbas region or Russia will seize it, rejecting any compromise to bring about an end to the war. While at present, Moscow controls about 85% of Donbas.
Well, Trump had previously mused that Russia will inevitably win more land and that Ukraine would be better off settling. But Ukraine's allies are against the idea.
Now, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that Kyiv should be in the strongest possible position in the conflict, particularly during negotiations for a ceasefire or lasting peace.
We have to remember that so far as Europe is concerned, that the one aggressor in Ukraine, and that is Putin. This war could end tomorrow if Russia withdrew and stopped their aggression.
Well, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz rejected U.S. plan to pay out Russian frozen assets in the EU to the U.S. He said the money must go to Ukraine.
Das ist eine europäische Angelegenheit.
This is a European matter, and I see no way of economically transferring the money that we then mobilize to the United States of America, and the American government knows this. It is also the negotiating position of the German government, the representatives who negotiate on our behalf in the various formats, and that is also the consensus at European level. There are no differences whatsoever on this. This money must flow to Ukraine and help Ukraine.
Geld muss der Ukraine zufließen.
Also on the diplomatic front, Turkey, key brokers summoned envoys from both Ukraine and Russia after Kyiv claimed drone attacks on Russia-linked tankers in the Black Sea. Now, Israel carried out fresh airstrikes on Lebanon just 1 day after civil envoys from both the countries sat down for direct talks for the first time in many years.
And this is the moment an Israeli missile struck a building in a village in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces carried out several other strikes across the region.
Now, another Israeli strike hit the Nabah village in southern Lebanon. Rescue workers reached the site to douse the fire, while IDF claims it is targeting Hezbollah sites. Lebanese officials and eyewitnesses say that Israel is targeting residential areas and buildings where civilians live.
The neighborhood is full of residents. It's a 3-story home. It's completely civilian. The owners live in Beirut. Unfortunately, they didn't have time to remove their memories and important personal items.
Well, despite a ceasefire technically being into effect since November 2024, Israel has regularly carried out attacks on Lebanon. And the latest wave of Israeli strikes follows the first direct talks between the delegations of the two countries.
Following the negotiations, the Lebanese leadership issued a statement saying that the next round of talks will be held on December 19th after a positive first meeting.
Until now, the reactions to the first meeting have been positive, and we must take advantage of this to achieve our goal of avoiding the spectre of a second war in Lebanon.
Well, the Israeli side also lauded the historic meeting, calling for peace between Israel and its neighbors.
This is a historic development. Be in no doubt that this direct meeting between Israel and Lebanon took place as a result of Prime Minister Netanyahu's efforts to change the face of the Middle East. As the Prime Minister has said, there are unique opportunities to create peace with our neighbors.
Israel insists on Hezbollah's disarmament as a key condition for peace between the two countries. While Lebanon's envoy has not explicitly agreed to this demand yet, both sides are willing to expand the scope of one-on-one talks.
And Israel is waiting for the return of the last hostage remains which are held by Hamas in Gaza.
And according to the Prime Minister's office, the government has sent a delegation to Cairo to discuss efforts for the return of the remains of the last hostage.
Now, under the U.S. brokered ceasefire, Hamas was supposed to return all 48 hostages, including 20 who were still alive.
All but the remains of Israeli Ran Gvili has been handed over to Israel, accusing Hamas of delaying the process. Hamas claims the retrieval process is slow because they have been buried under the vast piles of rubble left by 2 years of devastating war.
You know, when we say the word all, it means all. So if there is one left to be brought back home, then we will be able to say all. Until now, we've got most of them, that's true, but there's still one missing, and it's our obligation to make sure that they're all back home.
I believe they would come back because Trump is involved, not because of our government or anything like that.
Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas thanked Chinese President Xi Jinping for China's $100 million aid to alleviate Gaza's humanitarian crisis and support reconstruction plans for Gaza. He said Palestine will work with China to achieve peace based on international law.
Now, the Foreign Press Association in Jerusalem protested the Israeli Supreme Court's 9th extension on its petition for independent journalist access to Gaza. Since October 2023, Israel has blocked independent foreign media, allowing only embedded reporters. The FPA views the continuous delays now until December 21st as an intentional tactic by the state to delay filing their preliminary response.
Well, in another development, the upcoming Eurovision Song Contest is facing a major boycott, with Spain, Ireland and the Netherlands withdrawing. And this is after organizers refused to hold a vote on Israel's future participation. The withdrawal is a direct protest against the situation in Gaza. Iceland is reviewing its involvement, while Belgium, Finland and Sweden have also indicated that they might boycott.
We have to remember that there have been movements calling for a boycott of Eurovision because of Israel for several years now, since 2019, since the contest in Tel Aviv. That's when the pro-Palestinian boycott, divest, sanctions movement first called for countries to boycott Eurovision because of Israel. Now we finally see those boycotts happening.
Now, despite the setback, the organizers of the Eurovision Song Contest are optimistic that the 70th edition of the contest would be held on a grand scale.
It's no ways a crisis. We've got 35 members or so going to join us next year. Now, I understand the 4 or 5 who might not come. That's their choice. I completely respect that. I very much hope they'll be back with us in 2027. And I also very much hope that they will still broadcast the show and allow those fans who want to watch the show to watch it. But again, that's their choice.
But President Isaac Herzog of Israel praised the European Broadcasting Union's decision, saying Israel deserves to be represented on every stage. While Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar welcomed the news but condemned the countries that pulled out, saying that he was ashamed of those countries that chose to boycott. And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break.
But don't go anywhere. News and updates will be on the other side of World DNA. Keep watching WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
As Mahavatar Narsimha inches closer to the Academy Awards, we decode the Mahavatar cinematic universe. Know why interactive movies are gaining momentum, and take a look at our celebrity-approved winter style guide. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION at these times.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
So much for staying with us. You're watching Rone with me, Jyotsna Sakma, and my colleague Diksha Bisla. Let's begin with the headlines now.
After a red carpet reception with a warm hug and a car ride with the Prime Minister Modi, Russian President Vladimir Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan today and will also be visiting Rajghat this morning.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi presents a Russian-language copy of Bhagavad Gita to President Vladimir Putin during his two-day visit to India, describing the scripture as a source of inspiration for millions worldwide.
All eyes will be on the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit, which will focus on defense, energy and trade. Multiple agreements and MOUs are expected to be signed as President Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi hold talks today.
The United States approves $2.68 billion sale of bombs to Canada, where Prime Minister Mark Carney is sharply expanding defense spending amid uncertainties over relations with Washington.
The U.S. military says a strike on an alleged drug trafficking boat in the Eastern Pacific Ocean killed 4 people, with video showing the vessel being hit by a blast. U.S. campaign has so far taken more than 85 lives in the region.
The FBI arrests a Virginia man accused of placing 2 pipe bombs outside headquarters of Republican and Democratic National Parties in Washington on the eve of the U.S. Capitol attack in January 2021.
I think they've spent a lot of time killing each other, and now they're going to spend a lot of time hugging, holding hands, and taking advantage of the United States of America.
U.S. President Donald Trump and the leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo sign a peace deal, even as fresh violence raises questions about accords to end one of Africa's longest wars.
Israeli raids hit southern Lebanon as its military says it is targeting Hezbollah weapon storage facilities a day after Lebanese and Israeli civilian representatives held their first direct talks in decades.
Pakistan's President Asif Ali Zardari approves appointment of Army Chief Asim Munir as the country's first Chief of Defence Forces for 5 years, following parliamentary approval of the 27th Constitutional Amendment.
Japan's household spending unexpectedly fell 3% in October, marking the sharpest drop in almost 2 years. The decline raises fresh concerns about consumer demand and adds pressure on policymakers as they weigh the timing of future rate moves.
The Russian president is in India for a visit that the world is watching.
It's Putin's first such visit to the country after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Since then, much has changed. More recent factors have triggered a global realignment of ties. Now let's break it down for you.
Well, Russia's relation with India is a historic one, which has been alive and well since the Soviet era, but the alliance has come under fresh scrutiny of the West as Russia's war with Ukraine drags on. Vladimir Putin's ongoing visit to New Delhi and India's warm welcome to a time-tested ally is more than just about bilateral cooperation. It is strategic signaling to the West.
U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff tirade against oil trading partners has also affected India. These are testing times for bilateral relations between Washington and New Delhi. The U.S. has accused India of supporting Russia amid an ongoing war with Ukraine by purchasing oil from Moscow.
On its part, India has reiterated its support for peace, but also ensuring national interests. New Delhi also pointed out Europe's own trade relations with Russia as a major purchaser of Russian energy till date.
On Wednesday, the European Union agreed to phase out Russian gas import by 2027. But nothing is written in stone, as several member states of the bloc are opposed to this and are preparing to legally challenge this decision.
While the US and European countries have slammed sanctions on Russia to try and deplete its war chest, Moscow has diversified and strengthened its relations with other players.
Now, Russia and Iran relations have grown significantly in the past few years. For both the countries, the mutual goal has been to counter Western influence.
Iran has supplied Russia with drones in its war with Ukraine, and Russia, on its part, will be providing Iran with advanced military weapons. Additionally, Russia has a $25 billion deal to help Iran build its nuclear power plants.
Now, Vladimir Putin has also shifted his focus to Central Asia, a region which has long served as what experts call a backdoor to trade. In October, the Russian president attended the second Russia-Central Asia summit in Tajikistan.
Last week, he was in Kyrgyzstan for a 3-day visit. Now, while these visits are not a first, their timing and agenda is important.
And it is not just the Ukraine war and U.S. tariffs that have influenced the changing dynamics. Trump, in his early remarks, has lashed out BRICS, a bloc with members like Russia and India that has kept multilateralism alive.
American trade against its own trade partners has also pushed India and China closer, a moment of softened diplomacy, which was witnessed at the SCO summit as well between Indian Prime Minister Modi and his counterparts Putin and Xi Jinping.
Now, just weeks after SCO's summit, Putin is in India after 4 years. His visit raises an important question. Is multilateralism alive and well? And how will the West react to the Russian president's India visit? And our assistant editor of Foreign Affairs, Sidhan Sibal, is now joining us on the phone line. Sidhan, thank you so much for joining us. Could you just tell us about today and the itinerary that we are going to be looking at today for President Putin?
Well, the Russian president will be accorded a ceremonial reception at the forecourt of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. This is a state visit. It happens at 11 a.m. He goes to the Rajghat, pays homage to Mahatma Gandhi, and then thereafter the talks begin at the Hyderabad House in Delhi. There will be a press statement followed by a business meeting as well. And then, of course, the president will get a state banquet at the Rashtrapati Bhavan when he meets the Indian President Draupadi Murmu. Now, after that, he, of course, leaves for Moscow. But today is a big day in terms of the India-Russia annual summit, the 23rd summit, where several pacts are expected to be announced. And, of course, focus on trade. Economic partnership remains the key focus today, and expect big ticket announcements, including attempts and focus to reduce the trade deficit between the two countries. India wants Russia to buy more, and for that the focus is on agriculture products.
Right, Siddhant, and we know that Putin's visit will be followed by the US trade delegation, which will be visiting New Delhi next week. How do you think the chronology of these events is going to affect that?
Well, yes, coincidentally, it's happening, but I think one should not read too much in it, because trade delegations from US have been visiting India with not much success, primarily because of the Trump administration's attitude. The tariffs which have been imposed on India have been impacting India economically. So India is looking at diversification. And today's focus on sending or exporting more agriculture products from India to Russia will be significant at a time when the US markets are off limit in many ways, primarily because of the tariffs. So India is getting a major market today, that is Russia. And that, of course, is the important aspect. Nobody knows when the trade deal with the American side will be announced, but the logic of it is diminishing rapidly given the actions and the comments, of course, by the US administration led by Donald Trump.
Right. Thank you so much, Siddhant, for getting us all those details. That was our Assistant Editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibbal, joining us on the phone line.
And Indigo has issued a heartfelt apology to customers and industry stakeholders after widespread disruptions across its network and operations over the past 2 days.
Well, Indigo has been experiencing a sharp rise in cancellations, reaching approximately 170 to 200 flights per day, which is significantly higher than normal.
Now, passengers across multiple airports voiced strong frustration as Indigo's nationwide operations remain severely disrupted, leaving many strangled without clear communication or alternate travel options.
The airline said that it remains focused on streamlining its operations at the earliest. The airline said that its team are working diligently and making all efforts with the support of the DGCA and others to reduce the cascading impact of these delays and restore normalcy. Indigo further said it is keeping passengers informed about any changes to their flight schedules and advised travelers to check the latest status before heading to the airport.
Indigo, one of India's largest and fastest growing airlines, operate a fleet of over 400 aircraft and runs more than 2,300 flights daily. The carrier connects over 90 domestic and more than 45 international destinations.
A man from Virginia has been arrested and charged with planting pipe bombs near the U.S. Capitol nearly 5 years ago.
And this was hours before supporters of President Trump stormed the building on January 6, 2021.
30-year-old Brian Cole Jr. is accused of placing 2 pipe bombs outside the Democratic National Committee and Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. on the 5th of January 2021. Now, the bombs were discovered the next day and were deemed viable, posing a significant threat to public safety.
According to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Cole faces charges of interstate transportation of an explosive device and attempted destruction using explosive materials. FBI Director Kash Patel has said that Cole's arrest resulted from a re-examination of the existing evidence while claiming that previous administration had refused and failed to do so. However, there was no statement from the officials regarding the motive behind his alleged actions.
We did not discover any new information. What we did, an investigation spearheaded by the deputy director and the ADIC of our Washington field office, brought in a new team of investigators and experts, re-examined every piece of evidence, sifted through all the data, something that the prior administration refused and failed to do.
FBI raided a home in Virginia's Woodbridge, which is reportedly linked to the arrested accused. According to an FBI affidavit filed in court, Cole lived with his mother and other family members in Woodbridge and worked in the office of a bail bondsman. The affidavit also listed numerous purchases allegedly made by him of components that were used in the pipe bombs, as well as tracking of his cell phone use on the day the devices were placed in downtown Washington.
Now, the arrest marks a significant breakthrough in the case, which was stalled for years, with the FBI repeatedly issuing calls to the public for tips. The Bureau had released numerous photos and video clips of a masked and hooded suspect over the years and eventually increased the reward for information, leading to an arrest to $500,000. And WION's correspondent Susan Terani has sent us this report from New York about the latest breakthrough in the case.
U.S. authorities have finally made a breakthrough into one of the longest running mysteries tied to the January 6th Capitol attack. The FBI has arrested 30-year-old Brian Cole Jr., accusing him of planting 2 live pipe bombs outside the Republican and Democratic National Party headquarters on January 5, 2021. Devices that investigators say could have killed or seriously injured bystanders. After nearly 5 years with no leads, Attorney General Pam Bondi says that the arrest came from re-examining evidence sitting at the FBI and not new tips. FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, who revived the investigation, said that the suspect was tracked through painstaking review of footage as well as forensic data. Agents executed multiple search warrants on Thursday at properties linked to Cole. The case has long fueled conspiracy theories and political tension here in the United States, and the arrest is seen in part as a major step towards resolving one of the most troubling unanswered questions tied to the January 6th era. The investigation, of course, is ongoing and more charges may follow. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And China's consumer slowdown is prompting a new and unusual trend on the mainland.
More than 30 retail and tourism companies are now offering tangible perks, not to customers but to their shareholders. Now the move comes as weak jobs growth, a soft property market and tightening household budget weighs on spending. Take a look at this next report for more details.
More than 30 consumer goods and tourism companies in mainland China are offering tangible perks to shareholders as economic pressures deepen. From free attraction tickets to steep product discounts, firms are using incentives to stimulate sales and lift sentiment. The move reflects rising pressure from weak employment, a sluggish property market, and slowing retail sales, which grew just 2.9% in October, the weakest reading in over a year. Even tourism, traditionally a resilient sector, is losing momentum. During the 8-day holiday, average per capita spending dropped 13%. Visitor behavior is shifting as consumers prioritize value for money, hurting revenues across scenic operators. Major firms are seeing slower revenue growth, with more than 15,700 Grade A tourist attractions competing nationwide. Pricing pressures continue to intensify. Food and beverage companies have joined the perks trend, but results remain uneven. Analysts say these promotions help clear inventory and show visible effort in a weak economy. But structural challenges remain, with consumption expected to stay subdued through 2026. Companies are increasingly relying on shareholder incentives to maintain engagement and support sales. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Another news, Russia has blocked Apple's video calling service, FaceTime.
Now, this, of course, escalating a broader crackdown on foreign tech platforms that it says are being used for criminal activity. Now, the ban comes amid mounting restrictions on apps from Meta, Google, and Telegram. And as Moscow tightens control over encrypted communications, this is.
Russia's state communications watchdog has confirmed that Apple's FaceTime app has been blocked nationwide. The agency said that law enforcement has warned that FaceTime was being used to organize and carry out terrorist attacks, recruit participants, and commit fraud against Russian citizens. However, no evidence was provided to support the claims, and Apple's FaceTime service allows free video and audio calling over Wi-Fi or mobile data. Moscow residents reported that attempts to use the app returned an error message reading user unavailable, with some saying that calls rang on the receiving device but could not connect.
Now, critics say the move is part of a wider effort to censor foreign platforms and tighten state control over private communications. But Russia claims it is a legitimate security measure. The FaceTime ban follows restrictions on YouTube, WhatsApp, and Telegram. Last week, Russia threatened to block WhatsApp entirely if it fails to follow the country's communication and data laws. Now, the move escalated a months-long standoff between Russia and the Meta-owned messaging service over access to user information in criminal and terrorism-related investigations.
In August, Russia began limiting some call features on WhatsApp and Telegram, accusing both foreign-owned platforms of refusing to cooperate with law enforcement requests. On Wednesday, Russia blocked access to the US children's gaming platform Roblox, accusing it of distributing extremist material and LGBT propaganda. Russian officials have been actively promoting a state-backed alternative messaging app which is called Max, which critics claim could allow authorities to track users and access private data. State media has dismissed those concerns as false, saying that Russia needs digital sovereignty to fight cybercrime and extremism.
Now, Joe Root has finally ended his drought in Australia.
This is after 16 matches, 30 innings and 4 tours spanning over a decade. The England batter has got a century on Australian soil.
Now, Root walked in with England in disarray in Brisbane. They were 5 for 2 and teetering on the brink. Root survived an early chance, settled his feet and began to build his characteristic calm. Wickets continued to fall at the other end, but Root remained determined. On 88, just 1 run short of his previous best in Australia, he berated himself for pushing and missing outside off stump to bowler Cameron Green. But he dug in, fought through and finally reached the landmark with a flick to fine leg.
Root had previously made 950s and scored 900 runs down under. But his average of 33.33 was the lowest of any country in which he had batted more than twice. But this century ends any conversation about whether Root, already the second highest run scorer in Tests, can be considered an all-time great without a Test century in Australia. Root remains not out in 135 with England, 325 for 9 at stumps on day 1.
Only Sachin Tendulkar with 5100s, Jack Callis with 45 and Ricky Ponting with 41 have more Test centuries than Joe Root, who is now at 40. With this milestone, Root solidifies his place among cricket's elite as the only active player in this top 5 and one of the few to combine longevity with consistent big scores.
An Oscar-winning actor, Kate Winslet, stepped behind the camera for the first time for a movie, Goodbye June.
Now, the star's premiere took place in London. Set during the holiday season, the drama explores intimate family dynamics, with Winslet taking on a powerful dual role as both actor and director. More about this in our next story. Take a look.
No challenge that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting all of it. I was expecting it all to be chaotic and busy and full on and multitasking, but I was ready for that. I really was. I mean, we prepared fully. We had a proper 7 weeks of prep, which is actually not very long.
I didn't even know if I could write a screenplay. I just really wanted to give it my best shot, and the fact that it's been made into a movie is insane. You know, I just can't wrap my head around any of it. And yeah, I think it came from a place of remembering my own grandmother.
Well, that's all we had for you in this edition of World DNA.
But don't go anywhere. News and updates will follow on the other side, and we leave you with some climate stories that have been making headlines across the world. Thanks for joining. Keep watching WION for this one.